appears that they may have brought down
a barrage of missiles. Good evening. Saddam Hussein is fighting back. Iraq launched 10 Scud missiles at Saudi Arabia today, but most of them were intercepted by U.S. Patriot missiles before they hit the ground. And on another front, 3 American soldiers were paraded through Baghdad and made brief statements on Iraqi radio. One of the captured Americans is identified as Navy Lieutenant Jeffrey Zahn, who's from South Jersey. He had been listed as missing in action. Tonight, his parents in Cherry Hill are relieved but still very concerned. Bill Baldini has more.
Air war, the Pentagon is saying that the missions are going very well. Still today, as we said, Saddam Hussein fired back, launching deadly Scud missiles at U.S. installations in Saudi Arabia. The videotape shows the terror, and then the flashes of light as American Patriot missiles intercept a Scud missile over Saudi Arabia. A total of 10 Iraqi Scud missiles were fired at 2 locations, Riyadh and Dhahran. The U.S. says that 9 of the missiles were intercepted and that 1 fell harmlessly into the sea. Meantime, the Pentagon says that Allied forces keep pounding away at Iraqi installations.
As of today, the continuous operations have raised the total count for Operation Desert Storm sorties to over 7,000.
The military says that air attacks have all but neutralized Saddam's communication systems and that at least 16 of the dreaded mobile Scud missile launchers have been destroyed. Saddam himself is still not a target.
Even if we wanted to go after Saddam, I don't think that's an achievable objective. And that's not the way we fight wars anyhow. We don't go out to kill one person.
Israel, meantime, has continued to show restraint for now.
We will decide when to respond, just how to respond. We know that the government of the United States has certain concerns because of its large military presence in the area, and we will give very serious consideration to these concerns.
And for the crew, sending wave after wave of jets into the air, it's been a proud 4 days as the air attacks accomplish the mission that was spelled out for them. 13 American flyers now listed as missing in action. 9 United States airplanes have been shot down.
And in a national radio address monitored in Egypt, Saddam Hussein claimed to have the upper hand in the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein called for Arabs around the world to wage a jihad or holy war against the U.S. He added Iraq has only used a small portion of its...
Suggesting the groundswell for Israel to do that, in particular now because of the deaths that have been reported.
Patriot anti-missile defenses. A single Scud missile hit, devastating an entire neighborhood. 3 people died from heart attacks. At least 70 others were injured. This is what it looked like. There was chaos in the streets of Tel Aviv after the missile exploded. One apartment building took a direct hit. 20 other buildings were damaged. Rescuers racing to pull survivors out of the rubble. Emerging from the nightmare scene, just a few miracles.
My child was under the wall. The wall just fell on her. She's just alive. It's a miracle that she's alive right now.
Moments before the attack, air raid sirens sounded and 2 Patriot missiles were fired, but it was too little and too late. At airtime, growing pressure for Israeli retaliation tonight.
Right now, we're getting hit every night, you know. Life can't go on like this in a country like this. We have to protect our country.
Prime Minister Shamir has called an emergency meeting of his cabinet tomorrow to talk about what action to take.
Now, the question right now is, will Israel retaliate, a potential action that could escalate the war?
Standing by live with us right now is the Israeli Consul General to Philadelphia, Dr. Israel Pelek. First of all, what's the very latest information you have on the missile attack?
I think that you have the latest information right now on your news. You're doing a good job, and I'm not so sure that I can add many more things, except for maybe a phone call which I made with my family, who told me that it was really very devastating. The feeling is that we shall prevail, and even missiles will not move us out from our Holy Land. We were there for many generations, and we shall stay there for many more generations.
What about this pressure to retaliate? Are your relatives feeling it in Tel Aviv? Is the country feeling it? Is it going to happen?
The feelings is there, and the description that you brought is right. However, the decisions are made by the government, and the government will decide. They are the sole responsible for the decision of this kind. I believe that we maintain our policy that we shall respond if attacked. The timing and the manner, how and when, will be decided by the government.
Now, the Patriots worked in Saudi Arabia. What do you think happened in Tel Aviv?
Well, the Patriots, Larry, represent a real addition to our aerial defense. However, as you know, it didn't work this time in Israel, and therefore there is this kind of feelings there at this point.
After nearly a week of constant bombing, Saddam Hussein obviously still has these Scud missiles and the launchers. Does that surprise you?
Diane, we are not surprised. We were prepared for that. We said many times in the past that we should take Saddam Hussein very seriously. He is ruthless. He is going everywhere, and he will not hesitate to strike against civilians, against innocent people, against peaceful people.
Listen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Israel Pella, Consul General to Philadelphia.
Thank you.
Well, mixed reaction throughout the Delaware Valley tonight to the latest bombing attack on Israel. Local Jewish groups are praying for loved ones who live in Tel Aviv. And while members of Philadelphia's Arab community express sympathy for the Israelis, they wonder why the same concern is not expressed for the citizens of Baghdad. Arthur Fennell starts our coverage with the Jewish reaction.
As the Philadelphia Jewish Federation met tonight, they were just learning what had happened only moments before in their homeland. The people they had seen bloodied and battered on TV were family to them, and they too now felt the pain, the anger, the sorrow.
I would like at this particular moment for a moment of silence for our men and women in the Gulf and for all the Israelis who suffered in the raid today.
So they gathered at this exclusive $18,000 minimum a head fundraiser, one in a series aimed at raising $40 million in the Philadelphia area alone to try and aid the people of Israel.
When we scheduled this evening, of course, we had no thought of the horrible event that would happen this afternoon. It is making all of us think twice about our commitment to the state of Israel.
And as for the question of retaliation, I put it before the chairman of the United Jewish Appeal.
The leadership in Israel is as astute as any political leadership can be. They know what's at risk, and they're going to wait until the very last moment to retaliate.
Back at the meeting, as they sang the Star-Spangled Banner, suddenly the words were real. And so was the defiance of Ralph Snyder with loved ones tonight in Tel Aviv.
They will survive. There is no question in my mind that they will live through this and that Israel will be vibrant and vital as it always has been.
So while the damage assessment is still being tallied tonight, while the people of Israel mourn their loss and continue to brace themselves for possibly more attacks to come, here at home, help is on the way. Their brothers and sisters are also busy rallying money to be sent along with their prayers. At the Ritz-Carlton in Center City, Arthur Fennell.
Problems for the Allies. Iraqi troops have set fire to oil fields in Kuwait. At least 3 of the oil fields have been burning for nearly 24 hours. Saddam making good on an earlier threat that he would set them ablaze if he were attacked. And noted Middle East expert Professor Fred Fry of the University of Pennsylvania joins us now from our newsroom. What's the significance of the Iraqis setting fire to the oil fields?
Well, I think that is basically directed to the American public. There's been a lot of talk lately about an ecological catastrophe if all 363 of the oil installations were set ablaze at once. I think this is to prod that kind of discussion in the United States.
The big 3 Arab allies in this current Middle East fighting coalition say they'll stay in the coalition even if Israel retaliates. So that issue's off the board now, isn't it?
Well, I think it was well said earlier. The question is when and how Israel retaliates. If Israel sends missiles or flies around Jordan or retaliates in a limited way, why, I think that would be fine. The coalition would stand that. If she retaliates massively, that will cause problems.
All right, Professor Fred Fry, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. The showdown in the Gulf has hit home again in the Delaware Valley. An Air Force pilot from Bucks County is being held as a prisoner of war and has been paraded in front of Iraqi TV cameras. Channel 10's Meg Grant has the story and the local reaction tonight.
Would you tell us about your rank, name, and nationality?
I am Major Jeffrey Tice, an American.
Jeffrey Tice is just the latest of our captured airmen put on display by the Iraqis. But Jeffrey Tice grew up in Bucks County near Percy, and this high school friend remembers running track with him here at their high school.
Jeff was a hurdler, and I was a sprinter.
The Air Force is asking us not to broadcast any personal details about the downed airmen for fear that anything, even the name of an old high school friend, could be distorted to double-cross our POWs in an interrogation. So this friend goes nameless, as does their high school.
Up over Saudi Arabia, Iraqi Scud missiles again launched at Allied targets.
And the president says the Allies have dealt a severe blow to Saddam Hussein. The Channel 10 News update.
It had been a scene out of Star Wars, but it was a real-life missile fight in the skies over Saudi Arabia tonight. Meanwhile, the nation's top military man has a simple plan for beating the Iraqis.
First, we're going to cut it off, and then we're going to kill it.
Those stories now on the Channel 10 News.
Evening, the Gulf Showdown entered its second week the same way it began, with massive bombing raids by American planes. And tonight, in his first speech outside the White House since the war began, President Bush issued an upbeat progress report.
I am pleased to report that Operation Desert Storm is right on schedule. We dealt a severe setback to Saddam's nuclear ambitions. Our pinpoint attacks have put Saddam out of the nuclear bomb building business for a long time to come.
The president, speaking before an enthusiastic audience of retired military officers in Washington tonight, gave the war effort high marks. He renewed his vow to drive Iraq out of Kuwait. And he leveled another verbal barrage at Saddam Hussein for using Scud missiles against what he called civilian targets.
These weapons are nothing more than tools of terror, and they do nothing but strengthen our resolve to act against a dictator unmoved by human decency.
And the president added, no one will weep for Saddam Hussein when he's brought to justice.
Well, those missiles were on the move again tonight. A wild scene in the skies over Saudi Arabia tonight as Iraq launches its heaviest missile attack yet on that nation. The screaming sirens in Dhahran warned of incoming Scuds as U.S. Patriot missiles raced to the sky to meet them. One Patriot could be seen flying through the clouds and hitting its target, but a large piece of the Scud survived and plunged to the earth where it detonated. No injuries were reported. It was the third night in a row that Dhahran had come under attack. And look at this tonight, a piece of a Scud missile that fell to earth in the town of Riyadh tonight. Saudi soldiers wearing gas equipment quickly moved in to check to see if the missile was carrying gas. Fortunately, it was not.
At this hour, all is quiet in Israel. At an emergency cabinet meeting today, Israeli leaders voted against immediate retaliation for last night's missile attack, but would not rule out retaliation in the future. And take a look at what the day after brought in Israel, a clear look at the devastation caused by last night's deadly bombing. Bombed out buildings, all that remained in this neighborhood. More than 70 people were injured, and 3 elderly people died of heart attacks following this video, shot from the cockpit of a KC-130 refueling tanker that loads jet fuel into American F-15 warplanes. It takes 5 to 6 minutes to refuel one jet, and no radio communication is exchanged because airmen know the enemy are probably listening.
A lot of comment in our community and around the country about the coverage in this war. You should know it's the Pentagon that decides what you see and what you hear about the showdown of the Gulf. Is it censorship or military necessity? Channel 10's Arthur Fennell has our report tonight.
This is the type of TV coverage the military wants you to see. A positive, picturesque, well-oiled military machine, intimidating to the enemy. But conflicting information from the war-torn Gulf is revealing it may not be that way. Because of military censorship, all reports out of the Gulf, all of them are being heavily scrutinized, and it's causing a fight over the availability and the accuracy of the information that comes over the airwaves to you.
When you can operate in an unhindered way, as we have been operating over an area like this against an Air Force that size and with an air defense system that sophisticated, we have achieved air superiority.
But reporters in the Gulf are reluctant to believe that when their surroundings indicate otherwise.
We have explosions overhead.
Chairman of the Temple University Department of Journalism, David Womack.
Well, it's an age-old dilemma. Whatever the rules are, and I'm being maybe more philosophical about it, but whatever the rules are between the press and the military, in time of war they tighten. Whatever the rules are in Iraq, I'm sure that they're tighter.
And what do you think about your television war coverage so far?
Some of it I can accept
but other things I can't.
The press should not be asking so many questions because then everything will be revealed.
Okay, my right to know is very important, but I think the right and the safety of the troops supersedes my information purposes.
Immediate family member who needs to send a message due to birth, serious injury, illness, or death here at home, call the American Red Cross at 215-299-4000. That's the American Red Cross at 215-299-4000. During the Gulf War, Channel 10 will continue to provide help.
It has been a missile-free night in the Gulf War. The first quiet night since Iraq started launching Scud missiles at Saudi Arabia and Israel. And there are no explanations. But the Allied assault on Iraq continues. Overnight, the U.S. downed 4 Iraqi fighters. Today, the U.S. military concentrated on that giant oil slick in the Gulf. Iraq is waging environmental warfare, dumping millions of gallons of crude oil. Today, the Air Force blew up Iraqi pipelines, which slowed the amount of oil spilling into the Gulf. General Schwarzkopf explains.
What you're seeing here is that's the manifold area, the very small area that I talked about, and you're looking right through the nose of the guided munition as it's flown straight into the small manifold area to destroy it.
Video taken shortly after the bombing shows the Gulf water turning back to its blue color. The military says it's a good sign the oil has stopped, but there are still some oil fires burning on the Gulf.
But help is on the way to Saudi Arabia tonight to clean up that oil mess. American, Danish, and Norwegian environmentalists all on the way to the Persian Gulf tonight to help with the wildlife and plants threatened by that oil slick. Oil experts say that they're trying to line up the use of a 100,000-gallon tanker. The oil would be pumped into the ship and then would finally be taken out of the Gulf. And part of the United States crew that's going to the Persian Gulf is from the Delaware Valley. Harvey Clark reports tonight on a group from Delaware on standby to do major cleanup work off the coast of Kuwait.
U.S. officials believe the Iraqis turned on pumps that eventually spilled up to 125 million gallons of oil into the Persian Gulf. It could take a decade for the environmental impact on birds and wildlife to be measured.
We have a sister organization.
The Tri-State Bird Rescue Team in Newark, Delaware is on standby and may be shipped out as early as tomorrow to begin treating the contaminated birds from the spill.
The spill still is in the range of the guns from Iraq, the Iraqi guns in Kuwait, rather. So I don't think anyone has been up there really to assess what the impact on the wildlife might be.
The spill is 12 times larger than the 1989 Valdez accident in Alaska and threatens water and power supplies to all of the 8 nations along the Persian Gulf. It is still unclear why Saddam Hussein turned the pumps on.
The least of these is to make the amphibious landing more difficult. That's minor. The second goal is to cause severe water problems, not only for the Saudis and the other Gulf Coast states, but for our troops there. I think the third objective is to just illustrate again that he's willing to go to any lengths to achieve his victory in this contest.
The United States blew up part of the facilities in Kuwait yesterday and believe it may have stopped the oil release for now.
Believe me, I'm a lover of the outdoors. I'm a lover of the environment. I'm a conservationist. But I think some great man once said there are some things worth fighting for, and I certainly believe that also.
But even if the bombing was successful, the damage to the environment could last long after the war is over. Harvey Clark, Channel 10 News.
Most likely the next phase of the war in the Persian Gulf will be a ground conflict. Right now, Marines are training for a ground assault in case one is ordered by President Bush. Trucks carrying supplies and soldiers make daily runs to the Saudi-Kuwaiti border. Defense Secretary Dick Cheney said today the U.S. ground force will be ready well before the end of February.
But neighboring countries around the conflict are hoping that the war is over before then. In Iran, the parliament has worked up a peace proposal. Iranian officials are suggesting a simultaneous withdrawal for Iraq and the Allied forces. And Iran is confiscating all planes that come into its airspace. They're keeping all the aircraft and their crews until the war's over. So far, 24 planes, all of them Iraqi, are being held. But the Defense Department, our Defense Department, doesn't seem concerned by Iran's actions. And Iran is on record.
Assured everybody that they are neutral in this conflict and that they will, in fact, impound those aircraft until the war is over. We have no reason to doubt that they will do that.
Iran is on record denouncing Iraq's invasion of Kuwait.
The war in the Persian Gulf has made one man a household name. General Norman Schwarzkopf is the man leading the U.S. troops, and he has ties right here in the Delaware Valley. The general attended the Valley Forge Military Academy. And as Terry Ruckles reports, people who knew the general are not surprised he has the top job in the Gulf.
General Norman Schwarzkopf, head of the Allied operations in the Gulf. His friends call him Bear. The man who is head of the largest buildup since the invasion of Normandy grew up in this house in Lawrenceville, New Jersey. Norman Schwarzkopf began his military career right here in the Delaware Valley at the Valley Forge Military Academy. Norman Schwarzkopf was valedictorian of the class of 1952.
He was dedicated. He was an optimist. He was, in my opinion, a doer. He was dedicated, and he was a morale builder.
Milton Mendenbach was commandant of cadets in 1952. The retired general remembers Schwarzkopf as the editor of the yearbook, a member of the football team, and the cadet who threw the shot on the track team.
Good enough was never good enough for Norm. It had to be excellent.
The fact that a Valley Forge military graduate has now gained the attention of the entire world has not been lost on the cadets who call this prep school home.
It's boosted the morale of the Corps.
Schwarzkopf is not the only graduate of Valley Forge who is playing a key role in the Gulf War. John Yosak, the valedictorian at the school 3 years after Schwarzkopf, is a lieutenant general and now in charge of the Army troops serving in the Gulf.
It shows how good a school Valley Forge really is, and sometimes that gets overlooked.
While Valley Forge is a military school, less than 5% of the graduates go on to military careers. But one who did now has the attention
related to the Gulf War are being taken seriously, especially at the White House. Today, before President Bush arrived back from Camp David, 2 decoy helicopters made passes over the White House. The decoys are intended to foil any terrorist attack against the president's chopper. Security throughout the White House has been tightened since the war broke out. Tonight's Super Bowl also getting extra security with concerns that terrorists might strike at America's biggest sporting event. At Tampa Stadium, 74,000 fans had to pass through metal detectors. Authorities in Florida banned portable radios and camcorders in the stands, all part of the tightest security ever for a Super Bowl. And in North Jersey at the Meadowlands, hundreds of people with relatives in the Gulf attended a Super Bowl party hosted by Governor Jim Florio. The governor has a sister-in-law serving in Operation Desert Storm. He threw the party to show loved ones they're not alone and to try to ease their worries with a little football diversion. And by the way, in case you were wondering, Governor Florio backed the Giants 100%. That's because the new Super Bowl champs actually play in New Jersey.
And, of course, Steph, all around the Delaware Valley, in bars and in restaurants and in private homes, every place, people were throwing Super Bowl parties tonight. This year, though, was different. Walk into any Super Bowl party around the Delaware Valley, and this is what you'll see. It's the Giants.
The Giants are going to win.
And the Bills. And the indifferent.
As long as the Eagles are out, it doesn't matter.
But it's still
to date. That's what it sounded and looked like early this morning as artillery fire pounded Iraqi positions 6 miles inside Kuwait, giving some American ground forces their first taste of combat.
Can't wait to do it. This is what we've been training for myself, 13 years.
I'll stay on it and do my mission and get back alive so I can see my wife and kids.
The first one, and then after that, the boy said, "Ooh, man!" That first one down, we said, "Yes." Kept it going.
We're told attacks like the one you just saw are intended to soften up Iraqi positions for a possible Allied invasion of Kuwait.
On another front, at sea, the Pentagon says tonight the U.S. warplanes may have knocked out oil pipelines, feeding the worst oil spill in history. But not before some 460 million gallons of crude oil poured into the Gulf, threatening wildlife and desalinization plants that produce much of Saudi Arabia's drinking water. Tons of oil cleanup equipment is being rushed to the scene. Tonight, the main spill, by the way, is 10 miles wide and 35 miles long. Iraq launched its 7th Scud missile attack at Israel tonight. You can see the flash from Tel Aviv as the rockets smashed into the occupied West Bank. There are no reports of injuries or damage in the mostly Arab areas. Pieces of a Scud missile blown apart near Riyadh fell into a vegetable farm tonight. It was hit by U.S. Patriot defense missiles before it reached the Saudi capital. The debris crashed through a fiberglass greenhouse, but no one was hurt. Iraq has fired over 50 Scuds at Saudi Arabia and Israel since the war got underway.
Some chilling words from Baghdad tonight. Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein is quoted as saying the missiles he's been firing at Saudi Arabia and Israel have the capability of carrying chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons. Saddam was interviewed today by CNN reporter Peter Arnett, who quotes the Iraqi dictator as saying, in his words, "We have maintained our balance using only conventional weapons." Arnett also said Saddam told him, quote, "Iraq will use weapons that equate the weapons used against us." Now, Saddam told the reporter that Kuwait is part of Iraq and will remain so, and he predicted lots of blood will be shed on every side. The Israeli government coming out with a threat of its own tonight, though. Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir says, quote, "If Iraq attacks Israel with chemical weapons, Saddam Hussein risks himself and his country to a very, very grave extent."
However, the threat from Iraq's Air Force continues to recede tonight, but not because more planes are being blown out of the sky. More than 80 Iraqi planes have fled to safety in Iran. Right now, no one knows why, but U.S. field commanders call that development a pleasant surprise.
We're delighted to see that because every one of those aircraft that leaves Iraq is one less that we will have to engage in combat.
Iraq may be trying to save its remaining airplanes, or pilots could be defecting, but in any case, Iran says it plans to hold the aircraft until the war is over.
Now, for the past several weeks, 10 News has been following the story of a Mount Airy woman who, in spite of the danger, voluntarily went to the war zone with a group of American peace activists. Tonight, for the first time since she left, her family has received word that she survived the first days of the war. Bonnie Keller has the story.
What's the condition on the border right now?
This afternoon, Charles Bauerlein heard the words he's longed to hear since his wife Agnes, peace activist and mother of 11, left for the Iraqi desert over 2 weeks ago. She's safe. I placed a call to Joseph Parsons, a Roxborough musician and one of the members of the Gulf Peace Team in Amman, Jordan. Parsons is now working to get Agnes and about 80 other activists out of Baghdad to safety.
The situation is right now we're trying to get some buses from Amman to drive into Baghdad to pick up the remaining Gulf Peace Team members.
The peace team went to the Iraqi desert in a symbolic gesture to stop the war. Yesterday, they moved to a hotel in Baghdad. Because of a shortage of food and water and no way to communicate, Parsons, shown here during a Channel 10 News interview earlier this month, left for Jordan from Baghdad several days ago. He is arranging for transportation and diplomatic clearances for the others out of Baghdad, hopefully by the end of this week.
Assuming that we can get out Wednesday morning, we have to leave very early in the morning, probably around 4 o'clock, we're assuming, to get to the Amman border by 7 or 8 to get a good clear shot all day into Baghdad. We will not travel at night.
Yeah, that would be inadvisable.
Was Agnes's peace mission a failure? Not to her family, who are determined to continue her efforts here, with a banner calling on the president to convene a Mideast peace conference now. While Charles Bauerlein doesn't believe the war is just, the anxiety he has felt since his wife left has been worth it. Peace is worth any price. Now, only to get her home.
Tell her I love her dearly, and I appreciate her much more now than I ever have before in my life.
Bonnie Keller, Channel 10 News, update.
President Bush took on the war critics today, defending the Allies' nonstop bombing of Iraq. Bush made his remarks to a convention of religious broadcasters, saying the Allies wanted to spare civilian casualties.
Doing everything possible, believe me, to avoid hurting the innocent. Saddam's response? Wanton, barbaric bombing of civilian areas.